My name is Ryan Shore. I know I've met some of you over the last couple of months as I've begun this journey on my race for Assembly here in the 3rd District. I've had a chance to speak in this room to some of you, but again, for those of you who don't, my name is Ryan Shore. I'm a 6th generation California farmer and rancher. My family came here in 1861 from Germany, and I've been farming ever since. That's my business. That's what I do. That's what I love to do. That's who I am. That's what I want to continue to do. In that process, I've seen a lot of things happen to our state. A lot of things that have run a lot of people right out of business. I think a couple of you might have heard this the other day, but I had a chance to go into Napa Auto Parts. I laughed because somebody said Napa Valley. I said, no, Napa Auto Parts. And I picked up this auction bill, and it's for an online auction from Covanta Energy. It's an energy company that used wood in the cogeneration process. Well, I thought, what a travesty. Anybody's electric bills in here too high? Anybody think they need to go higher? They don't need to go higher. They're all too high. But yet California is running people right out of town. And that's a travesty to me. All the jobs that go with it, all the energy that's produced with it, those forklifts and trucks and tractors, all the people that would normally be driving them, all the goods and services that they would create, the money that would go back into the economy is lost. And why is that? Because policies in Sacramento and Washington affect lives of people on the ground here in Northern California. And that's a real problem. We've got to fix that. We've got to go to Sacramento with a message to reduce the size of our government, let common sense prevail in these rural areas that we live in, that we enjoy, that we recreate in, make sure good things can happen in our communities. We expect good schools, good roads, law enforcement that will come when we're in need. We've got to get back to the basics. Let me back up for just a second. I want to talk about why I decided to run for Assembly. I was sitting around our conference table in our office with my dad, my brother. We were hiring this spring for folks to come and work on our farm. Met a gentleman named Mike. He's from out in east of Marysville in Yuba County. He said, Ryan, I've got one problem. I said, Mike, what's that? He said, I don't have a driver's license. We were looking for somebody that could drive to our farm legally, of course, and drive our machines on the road or drive our equipment on the road if necessary. He said, the county took it away from me. I said, the county took your state driver's license away from me? How did that happen? He said, well, I fell behind on my child support. And I'm a big believer in families and honoring your commitment to your family, of course. But I said, well, what's the backstory? There's got to be another reason. He said, you're right. It involves trucks. I used to work for a trucking company out of Yuba City that had some financial trouble, went through some hard times, laid off a lot of people, really restructured their business. And he said, state regulations did that. I just rolled my eyes. Imagine that. State regulations forced a trucking company to slim down, lay people off. He said all these emissions things, all these requirements from CARB, the California Air Resources Board, that they're making us do to our trucks, they didn't have the money. They weren't making the money to do that. Those trucks were becoming worthless because nobody else could buy them either, because they weren't good for them. They're limiting the miles that we can drive on some of these trucks. So as a result, there was this guy in my office looking for a job, and he'd been looking for a job for a number of months, wanting to provide for his family. He couldn't even legally take his kids to the doctor, to school. I thought, what a travesty. This has got to change. We've got bureaucrats in Sacramento making these decisions. And it gives me goosebumps to tell you this story, because it's on and on and on and over that you see those types of things when you really look for them. You drive by our downtowns, the businesses are shuttered. People are having trouble. We have unemployment approaching 12% in some of these counties. And now we hear Sacramento wants more of our water. Just the other night, I was at a meeting with the Secretary of Resources, John Laird, talking about the twin tunnels. And he said, look, we don't want to take your water. You used the wrong word. And I said, well, convey. How about that? And he liked that a little better. And he said, but they're going to pay for it. I said, where are they going to get the water? And I don't think he really answered the question. And he said, there's just going to be $4 billion of habitat restoration that we're all going to have to pay for. So convey our water from Northern California, and then we're going to have to pay $4 billion for more habitat restoration. And I'm sure you're all familiar with how bonds work. If we spend $4 billion, the interest will cost us $4 billion, meaning the total cost is around $8 billion. And if we buy a bunch of ground, and there's talk in restoring the Delta that it might be 100,000 acres. If we buy that ground, who patrols it? We've got to send our game wardens out there. Now, my college roommate, as a matter of fact, is a game warden right here in western Tama County. He can tell you all kinds of crazy problems that they run into on state land. The management plans that go with it, patrolling it, it comes off the tax rolls, it comes out of production, they're not farming it, they're not growing anything, they're not trucking or processing or packaging or shipping those products out of here, bringing more money in. Instead, all that stops and it becomes a burden to our treasury. And that's got to stop. $4 billion just for habitat restoration. We talk about the twin tunnels. That could be upwards of $35 billion for 9,000 cubic feet per second to roll through a tunnel. How about we have the glass full of water before we have the straw? That's kind of my philosophy. I was on a tour of Sites Reservoir today, as a matter of fact, with some DWR officials, or what will potentially become Sites Reservoir, just west of the Interstate 5, west of Maxwell, over in the foothills. I think that could be quite a project for Northern California, because as we start diverting more water to Southern California, more water to habitat, there's more demand on water, obviously, from our growing cities, and judges saying the environment needs more water. We've got to come up with some more water here to keep our jobs, to keep our farms, to keep our communities going. And if we don't do that, we know what the consequences will be. So it's time we work on fixing some of those issues in California. That's what I want to go to Sacramento and do, is help facilitate projects like that. I've got a record of defending my industry. If you look in the Los Angeles Times, you look in the San Francisco Chronicle, you Google my name, and those newspapers, you'll see me defending agriculture and defending our communities. And that's what I want to do. I'm not using this as a stepping stone. I'm not a politician or a bureaucrat. I'm a farm boy. Grew up at the end of a gravel road 9 miles west of town, out in the country. I know what it's like when the state of California comes in, pays $11,000 for your neighbor's ground, and then all the critters come across the fence and eat my crop. I'm out there every night trying to protect that. And the state of California makes some decisions, says you might not have any water next year. They just announced a 5% delivery allocation for state water project contractors next year. What's that do? We rely more and more on groundwater. What's that do to the groundwater and domestic users and folks that have orchards that rely on water? I think that's a huge component of our economy that's being overlooked by Sacramento and by the bureaucrats there. We've got to rein that in. Somebody says, Ryan, how will you go to Sacramento and work with the Democrats? As a Republican, you'd be in the super minority, if you will. I said, number one, keep in mind, I'm a farmer. I work with Mother Nature. I don't care if you have a D or an R behind the end of your name. You've got to do good things. One of the stories I'd like to tell is when I talk with folks in Chico who might be from a little different persuasion, and I tell them, there's a lot we can agree on. They say, oh, really, Ryan? What's that? I said, I think it's a good idea to have schools that are good and our kids come out of there with the skills to compete in the 21st century economy, go on to university if they want to, get a job if they want to. We ought to have our homes and businesses protected by good law enforcement, have good roads. They said, well, absolutely. I said, if it's a good idea then to keep your money local and support local businesses, shop at the local Napa hardware store that Kent owns in Gridley, then how's it a good idea to send any more money to Sacramento or Washington because it just gets squandered? You see my point? If it's a good idea to invest locally and make sure there's money here locally, it can't be a very good idea to send more money down there because we know what happens. It goes into a black hole. It goes into these bond projects that then they get bought or they get financed, and then the operations and maintenance goes on and on and on. Look at this train deal, another one. $1 billion for 20-something miles of track. Just north of it, from Fresno, going north, about 30 miles. If you do the math backwards on that $1 billion, it works out to over $500 per inch. $500 per inch just to build the track, not to acquire the land, not the operations, not the maintenance, not any of that. We've got to get a little more common sense back to Sacramento. We've got to have people that understand how it works in Sacramento to tell our story, that have the courage, the conviction, and the know-how to get things done, can stand on their own 2 feet. I know some of you heard me say this, that I want to come back to the farm, get in my pickup, get my boots on, get the shovel out, move water. Let's do things. Let's get growing crops. Let's do the good things for our communities. That's who I am. That's what it's all about. I want to do this to make sure that there's an opportunity for another generation to continue, because at the rate we're going, I think we've got some serious challenges ahead, some serious problems in this state. I think we can do good work down there. Our forefathers fought, many of them died for us to have the freedoms that we do. And we know freedom isn't free. We've got to fight to keep it. And that's important. We've got to send people to Sacramento or to Washington, have their head on their shoulders, their feet planted firmly on the ground, and are willing to go to work and get things done and come home and live underneath the laws that they create. And it's not just the laws that are created underneath the dome of the Capitol in Sacramento. Because we all know that Sacramento is full of bureaucracies, boards, commissions, bureaus. The list goes on and on and on. Those are where regulations are dreamt up and imposed on all of us that have some serious consequences. Just as bad as what comes out of the legislature in many cases. I had a chance to have lunch not too long ago with George Runner. He serves on the Board of Equalization. He told me a story that I was just appalled. He said the state of California is sitting on a fund totaling $250 million of taxpayer money. They're just sitting on it. I said, they've got $250 million of our money? He said, Ryan, it gets worse than that. What that is from business owners who put on their form to the Board of Equalization that they intend to collect sales taxes, essentially an agent of the government, a tax collector. And if you anticipate strong sales, you're required to put so much of those anticipated sales and the taxes that it will generate in a fund in Sacramento. So that fund today totals $250 million. Wouldn't that money be better served in our communities? Better served in our schools? Better served in law enforcement, keeping criminals who've got this AB 109 thing? That money be much better served locally. He said it's even worse, Ryan, because the program costs $250,000 to administer. $250,000. But you know what? The whole cost of the program is only $500,000. So we're worried about people skipping out on paying their taxes, but we're sitting on $250 million to cover $500,000. That's a big difference. I'd rather have that $250 million back in the pockets of the people where it belongs. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to rein in those bureaucracies. And for reference, I encourage you to go to the Board of Equalization's website and look at the list of taxes and fees and things that they collect right out of here, right out of our communities, and put someplace else. So those are some of the things about me that I think are important for you to recognize. There are some differences. I'm excited to go to Sacramento. I think there are some good things that lie ahead for this state if we can make them happen in Sacramento. We've got to work across the aisle. We've got to reach out to those bureaucrats. We've got to bring them here so that they understand our concerns, so that they hear our voices, because for far too long, they have not. Would you agree? Yeah. We've been underrepresented here. And that's something you all know, I know. And you're working hard to change that, and I applaud your service. And I want to mention just one story. If you look on the back of a quarter, and it's the Delaware quarter. The state of Delaware has a quarter. There's a guy riding a horse on that quarter. When the Declaration of Independence was being discussed in Independence Hall in Philadelphia, there was a tie vote whether to break free from England or not. And a gentleman from Delaware had 3 delegates. A gentleman from Delaware was asked to cast one of the deciding votes, so they sent a message to him in Delaware to get to Philadelphia immediately. He rode through the night, through a storm, came to Philadelphia, cast the deciding vote so that our country could have independence. So that's my story, that one vote does in fact matter. So that everybody that you or I touch and can encourage them to vote, to understand what's going on in our state and our country and how it matters, really can make a difference. So I'm excited to go to Sacramento, be one vote, but a voice for everybody in Northern California, voice of common sense, somebody that knows what it takes to run a business, to hire people, because I just can't imagine hearing more of those stories come across my table, come across my conference table, that people out of work because of regulations from our state. Another company I deal with said, Ryan, we'll do business with you anywhere, just not California. We should have a different attitude. The company was based in Kansas City, Missouri. He said, literally, we'll do business with you in Egypt, the other 47 continental United States, whatever it might be, just not California. We've got to change that mentality so that our students can have jobs, so that there's a future here in Northern California. So that's me. That's what I'm all about. Patty, have I used my time? Are we doing good?
5 minutes if you want to cover anything else.
You know, I think that this crowd can ascertain who I am. Is there any question about who I am or what I stand for here? Yes.
I have one question.
Do you mind, Patty, if we do a...
We'd rather
Okay, she wants to do it a little later. Well, again, thank you so very much. Write your question down so you don't forget what they are. I want to go to Sacramento, work on water. That's important. And I want to leave you with something that I think really sums up who I am. We need less taxes and fees, more water and jobs. I think it kind of works out like that. Less taxes and fees, more water, and more jobs. And I don't want to be the politician that stands up here and talks about how I can create all kinds of jobs, because politicians often don't sign the front of the check. It's not their business that's on the top of that check. We've got to get people that are willing to invest in our communities, to invest in our state, not run them out of here. So again, less taxes and fees, more water and jobs. And with that, my wife Holly just walked in. So I want to introduce you to my wife. She's an epidemiologist. Don't ask me how to spell that, but it's studying epidemics and how they spread and preventing problems from happening, and deals with bioterrorism and all kinds of fun stuff. So public health is pretty important in our house as well. Again, one of those things is common sense. And I don't think this Affordable Care Act is really all that affordable. So we've got to get back to the basics a little bit, and I'm thrilled to have Holly here for those of you that haven't met her, to get a chance to meet her. She also gets out there on the tractor. She drives bank out for me when I'm harvesting rice. She's out there hauling it to the edge of the field sometimes. It's fun to do it as a family. That's why I want to make sure that other families like mine, whether they're selling insurance, whether they want to grow up to be doctors or lawyers or whatever it is, that they have that same opportunity. That's really what it's all about. I think everybody at the front of this table would agree with that. So I look forward to serving you in Sacramento. It will be a privilege and an honor. I'm excited to take your questions tonight. I think there's good things that lie ahead for our state. I'm excited to work with all of you in this room to make those kind of things happen. 570-7926 is my number. 570-RYAN is what that works out to. When I went on my 570-7926, 570-RYAN. My wife remembers that from one of our first dates, because she said, your dad's is 570-CARL. She remembers that, and that's what it is. That's how our employees and my grandmother and grandpa could get a hold of us around at the field if something really wrong was going on. They knew how to get in touch with us. So please, feel free to use that. Use my email. That goes straight to me. I want to be a guy you can count on in Sacramento to get things done, to reach out, make sure that your voice is heard. Make sure we bring some common sense back to Sacramento, back to the bureaucracy, rein it in a little bit, do good things. So thank you so very much, Patty. Thank you for indulging me with your time tonight.
All right, well, thank you for having me here tonight. I really appreciate all the work that you guys in the Tea Party do throughout the state. I go to my Tea Party down in the Yuba Sutter area. We actually have two Tea Parties. We have the Yuba Sutter Tea Party that meets in Marysville, and we have the Sutter Butte Tea Party that meets in Yuba City. And I'm always impressed with these groups, because you're always bringing information to the uninformed voter. That's what you guys are doing day in and day out. You always have the most interesting speakers. Maybe perhaps not tonight. But you guys are always bringing good people that are talking about the issues, getting people motivated, moving forward. One of my proudest moments on this campaign trail thus far is when I was at the Olive Festival, and you guys had your Constitution test that you were doing at the booth, and I passed with flying colors. So, you know, I think I 100%. So thank you for the job that you guys are doing. A little bit about myself. My name is James Gallagher, and I hail from down in Yuba City, Sutter County. I've been on the Board of Supervisors there for 5 years now, and I'm married to my wife Jana, who's here with us tonight, of 10 years, and we have 3 young children. And that's a big reason why I'm running for this seat. I'm running for the generations that came before, and the generation that I'm raising right now, and that many are raising throughout this state. My family, like many families in the North State, came here in the late 1800s, immigrated to this great state, and they found it to be a land of opportunity and freedom. It's a place where they had opportunity. That's a huge word, opportunity. Doesn't mean guaranteed success, but the opportunity to go and work with your hands, to build something, to build a legacy for your family, and to be able to keep the fruits of your labor. That was the idea that we had from the founding. Right, and it was something that, like, my ancestors who came from Ireland did not have. those kind of things were taken from them. Even though they worked for it, it went to somebody else, the king, right? And we had experienced tyranny over all those many years. But the brilliance of our founders is that they found that men living in freedom do great things. And that this is the best form of government that there ever has been. But if we lose it, we will devolve back into tyranny. And I know you guys all know that. So like I said, but we're also doing this for the next generation, because I fear that my kids will grow up in a California that doesn't have those opportunities. We're already there. I think a lot of you know that as well. In my professional life, I'm an agricultural attorney. I grew up on a farm similar to Ryan. And as I was growing up, I saw that, a lot of times the law didn't really play in our favor, and especially when we're dealing with government agencies, it didn't play in our favor. And so one of the things I wanted to do is learn the law and learn how to defend those people. And that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. Now, one of my proudest moments as an attorney is when I defended a farmer who went out and planted a field. That's all he did. And he went into the USDA office and he said, "Hey, I'm going to go plant these fields. This is what I'm planting this year." He said, I know there is wetlands in one of these fields, but this is the fields I'm going to plant. I won't be planting in this field. Well, 3 years later, the USDA came back and said, "Oh, that field you planted, that one had a wetland in it too, and we're going to fine you $750,000 that you're going to have to pay to the federal government." Now, we fought that case. We lost at the county level, and we finally went all the way up to the highest level of the National Appeals Division. We won. And we won for that farmer, but that should have never happened. That he should have to come and have to pay me and hire me to go do all that. That's the oppressive government that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And as a county supervisor, this is what I find myself dealing with over and over again. It's another reason why I want to go to Sacramento and try and change this. And what I find is that we do have an epidemic, right, Holly? We have an epidemic in the state. It's called government. It's out of control. It continues to grow. It never gets smaller. It eats up everything around it. And we're dealing. And one of the biggest things that I find, because in my county we deal with a lot with water, flood control issues, resource issues, is the growth of environmentalism. Also, you see it as Agenda 21. You know about it. These are environmental zealots who are invading every course of the government and invading every course of our daily lives as we see around. And they're trying to make it, let me go back to our ancestors here for a second. The people that came to this great state built a great legacy. They reclaimed the land from the swamp. They made it into the most productive agricultural heartland in the world. We built cities, we built towns, we built industry. We built a great legacy in this North State, and now it's under attack because there are zealots out there who believe that we should give the land back to the river, that we should give it back to the swamp. They believe that people shouldn't live out in the country in the rural areas, but they should all live in cities, and they should all have their own gardens, and we should all eat a certain way. And you're seeing that every day more and more. I see it with FEMA. In my county, FEMA came in and remapped the county, the southern half, my district, into a FEMA flood zone. You know what that means? Well, it means crazy insurance rates that you can barely afford, in many cases can't afford, and it means that you cannot build any kind of infrastructure in those areas. Now, we're fighting back on that. I actually helped form a national coalition that's fighting back on these regulations right now. It's called the Agricultural Floodplain Management Alliance, and if you'd like to be a part of that, please go on the website and sign up. It's afmaalliance.com. And so, we're fighting that battle. I see that battle all the time. I see it in the flood control. We want to build levees. And we're doing that now in Sutter County and Butte counties. But we see all these environmental groups coming in and saying, oh, you got to mitigate for every tree that goes down, for every elderberry bush, that you might affect. This is taking away our liberties. It's taking away our industry. It's hurting our economy. And it has to stop. And that's why I want to go down there and continue to be a fighter for us. In Sutter County, I'm proud of my record. We instituted pension reform in Sutter County, which is one of the first counties to do so in this state. We need to do a heck of a lot more down in Sacramento because last I checked, our pension unfunded liability is $300 billion in this state when you look at the entire state and all local governments. As I was talking to Terry earlier, Terry corrected me and told me what the real debt is right now in this state, $148 billion of debt. that this state is going to have to find a way to crawl its way out of. We need to do something about that. We got to get our fiscal house in order. We need to get something done on pensions and on health care. I mean, you're looking at health care right now. You think Obamacare is bad, but you know, in this state, they passed legislation that made it even worse. A couple years ago, they actually did pass a law in California that said that required insurance companies to get rid of health care plans that did not meet the Affordable Care Act. So now in California, we have over 1 million policyholders who have lost their health insurance, more than any other state because of that legislation. We made it even worse, right? We have to fight back against that. This overreach of government is it's affecting our very lives, our very health. And so I want to be an advocate for that as well. Another thing that I'm very passionate about is water. Water is the lifeblood of our North State. It powers our farms and ranches. It provides lifeblood for our cities, our towns, and it's ours. We developed those water rights with our own hard work and our own money. And you know what? That's our right, and we need to be able to keep it. And so what we need in this state are two things in order to have a good water policy. One, we have to build storage in this state. When we built Orville, there was 15 million people in this state. Now there's 38 million. That's the last time we built a major water project in this state. We absolutely have to build Sites Reservoir. It makes sense. Stop studying it again and studying it again. We know that that's the answer. We need to build Sites Reservoir, and we need constitutional protections for our water rights. I am tired of us every year in the legislature having to play this game with Southern California. Well, yeah, you have statutory water rights, but hey, if the public interest demands it, then maybe we can take it for the environment or we can take it for Southern California. We shouldn't have to play that game. If our rights are in the Constitution, they will be protected. So that's what we need to do on the waterfront. So many issues that there are, and I do want to leave time just to answer your questions, get your input. And that's a big part of what I want to do is going around. It's never about one person, okay? It's about all of us coming together, working together, sharing information. I was talking to Terry earlier, and he was giving me a lot of great information that I plan to use. And the information that I get from you helps me be a better legislator down in Sacramento, helps me carry the fight down in Sacramento. And I haven't given up on this state, and I do want to say this before I close, is I know it's a dark day in California. I know that. And it's easy to get depressed, and it's easy to say, man, I don't know if we can ever do that, okay? But 150 years ago this week, Abraham Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address. You think that was a dark day in our country when our own American brothers faced each other on the battlefield and shed each other's blood? That's how bad things had gotten. But what did he remind everyone that day? The way that you can honor these dead is by preserving this blessed liberty that you've been given in this country, and by recommitting yourself that a government by the people and for the people shall not perish from this earth. And I know that that's what's going on in this room. We're committing ourselves to do that, and together we can do it. Don't get down, okay? And believe me, I've been there before. I was a young college undergraduate at UC Berkeley, okay? Grew up in East Nicholas, South Southern California, conservative as possible. Went down there, but you know what, when we left, we had a college Republican party of 300 members strong on that campus. We started a conservative magazine. We were changing minds. We can do it in this state. If we can do it in Berkeley, I guarantee you we can do it in Sacramento. And with your help, we're going to get it done. So thank you for having me here tonight. Yeah.
Well, I'm not only the only Democrat here, but I happen to notice that I'm the only one wearing a tie. And I got to tell you, my first political race was 3 years ago when I ran for Congress against Wally Herger. And I don't know if any of you know Sue Gallagher from Los Molinos, but she had gone to a couple of events that I spoke at and said, you're wearing a coat and tie at all these events, and the people are more informal in this district, and you got to lose the coat and the tie. So I said, okay. So the very first event where I decided to try this out was an event in Red Bluff. It was a candidates' night. I didn't know who was going to be there, but it turned out it was candidates nights for a bunch of people running for judge and sheriff, and I think I was the only one there that wasn't running for that. So I walked in without a coat and tie, and every single person, there was about 9 of them on the balcony, had their coat and tie on. So anyway, maybe I've got to learn something here. Now I see what the appropriate attire is, and I'll be ready next time. So first of all, I want to thank the Corning Patriots for having this event and inviting the 3 of us here. You know, this is kind of a new thing for me because I'd met Ryan a long time ago, but I really hadn't met either James or Ryan in some time. Didn't know much about them other than what was on their website. I recognized their faces as soon as they walked in. But anyway, it's a great chance to get to know each other and kind of see where we're coming from. Now, it's really nice that we have 20 minutes because what I want to do is try to spend about 5 minutes talking about myself and some of the things I think are important and spend the last 15 minutes talking about the state of Jefferson. My background, if you don't know, I ran for Congress against Wally Herger 3 years ago, Doug LaMalfa last year. My background, UC Berkeley also, by the way, electrical engineer graduate way back when. And after that, I moved on and went to law school, became an attorney. I've been practicing law for 37 years now. And about 10 years into that practice, the senior partner in my firm who did the tax work suddenly died, and there was nobody to do that tax work, so I went back to school at night and got my master's degree in taxation. And I represent clients on a lot of things, but one of the things I do is represent clients against the IRS and also tax planning for them so they don't get into trouble to begin with. I'll tell you, just to be a little bit contrast from what we've heard so far, one of my big concerns is the disappearing middle class. And it is disappearing. And it's been disappearing for 25 years, but it's sped up here in the last few years. And just to give you some statistics, to give you an idea of what we're talking about here, the latest statistics that I could find, if we look at the total assets in the United States, the bottom 80% of us, and I think that includes just about everybody in this room, it certainly includes me, I don't know about you guys, but the poorest 80% of us own 12% of the total assets. 12%, that's real estate, stocks and bonds, cash, personal property, only 12% of those assets owned by 80% of the people. And not only that, but the top 20% is not fairly distributed either. The top 1% owns 37% of the assets. So the super wealthy have somehow managed to get themselves in a really, really good position. And as I say, it's gotten worse over the last 5 years by at least 5%. The bottom 80% went from a 17% ownership of assets down to a 12% ownership of assets. The top, in that same 5% drop, was similar at the top. The richest 1% went from about 32% of the assets up to 37% of the assets. So I don't think this is a good thing. And there's a number of reasons this is happening, some of which we can help out on in the state of California, and some of them it's more of a federal issue. Certainly when I was running for Congress, I was talking about the poor tax system we have, the income tax system, where basically the rich pay taxes at a lower rate than people who work for a living. And I hope you know what I'm talking about. The rich make their money on investments. They get dividends, they get capital gains, and they make their money through investments. They pay at a lower tax rate than us who have to work for a living. And that's a big part of why the super rich have gotten even richer. There's also some other factors, and education's a big one. When I went to Berkeley, I was on the quarter system. I paid $125 per quarter for tuition. It's not like that anymore. Now education, at least higher education, something that's really for the super rich. Education is the best indicator of all the factors of how much money you will make over your lifetime. And now to get a really good education, you either have to be very wealthy or come from a wealthy family, or if you aren't wealthy and get that education, you're going to walk away with a debt that you may never be able to repay. And we need to do something about that, and that's something we can do in California. And the final thing is, there's a pendulum when it comes to unions, labor unions. And sometimes they get too powerful, and sometimes they don't get powerful enough. And right now, we're at the bottom of this swing. The membership in our unions is at the lowest it's ever been in 75 years. And we need to support our unions, because unions are what guarantees the working person a fair wage. All right, enough of that. Let's talk about the state of Jefferson. First of all, I want to tell you that I'm not a Johnny-come-lately to the issue of the state of Jefferson. I've been talking about this for years. In fact, when I first ran for political office 4 years ago, I actually had a section on separating California into separate states on my website. But I've got to realize, or I came to the conclusion that the state of Jefferson, the way it's oriented or laid out at the present time, just isn't a viable way of doing things. But there is a viable way. There is a viable way. So here's the problem. I don't know if any of you saw the CBS documentary on the state of Jefferson. It was out about 2 weeks ago. It was pretty good. I thought it was pretty good. And one of the things they said in that I disagreed with is they said, you know, the bar is pretty high under our Constitution to allow a state to divide into separate states. And I disagree with that. The bar is actually, in my view, pretty low. You know what it takes? A simple majority of our state legislature has to vote for it, and then a simple majority of Congress also has to vote for it. That's not a very high bar. But it's a political issue. It's a political issue, and we need to face the political issue if we really want to make this thing happen. The fact of the matter is, California has a legislature that's not only a Democratic-leaning legislature, but has a super majority. The state of Oregon also has two legislative bodies that are predominantly Democrat. So the first thing that I would tell you is it's too complicated to try to accomplish three things. That is, get the legislature in California, the legislature in Oregon, and then Congress to pass this. I think we got to give up on trying to bring in those southern Oregon counties. We've got to just deal with California. 2 steps is always easier than 3 steps, okay? Now, when I go around talking about this, what I find is almost every Republican I talk with loves the idea. And almost every Democrat that I talk to hates the idea. In fact, they not only hate the idea, they think we're crazy when we're even talking about it. So, what are we going to do to make this thing work? Well, obviously, we got to somehow start talking Democrats into this idea and making them realize it's really a good thing, and it is a good thing. And let's just talk about why it's a good thing for a minute. Number one, and I guess I'm the only one that's using this statistic, but I think it's a great statistic. We are grossly underrepresented in Washington, D.C. The 22 smallest populated states in the United States, when you add their populations together, it's just about equal to the California population. But in California, we have 2 senators representing us back in Washington, D.C. Those 22 other states have 44 senators representing them. And the result of that is that California is financing most of those 22 other states. If you look at the statistics, over the last 20 years, California has sent over $100 billion more to Washington, D.C. than we've gotten back in any form. That's a billion with a B. A lot of that comes from our underrepresentation, particularly in the Senate. Now, and when our forefathers came to this great compromise in the Constitution where they made the House of Representatives based on population and the Senate based on the states, with everybody having 2 state senators, they could not have conceived of a state the size of California with such a huge population. If California was a country, it would have the 8th largest economy all by itself. And so the direct consequence of being unrepresented or underrepresented in Washington, D.C. is we're not getting our fair share of federal benefits. I propose something a little bit different than the state of Jefferson because I'm looking for a practical way to sell it. We got to get the Democrats on board. How are we going to do that? And it's my view that we really need to divide California into 3 states rather than 2, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. But in addition to being underrepresented in Washington, D.C., let's face it, if we were to divide California into 3 parts, California's government is a big government. It's almost an unmanageable government. If we divide it into 3 parts, it would be 1/3. Each government would be roughly 1/3 and a much more manageable government. But the final point, and this is the most important, and both these gentlemen talked about it, is water. We know that Southern California is really thirsty for our water. And they're not only thirsty to send our water down to the farms in Southern California, or even fill the swimming pools and water the golf courses with our water. Now we're moving into a world of fracking. And most of that fracking is going to be done in Southern California. And guess what? Fracking requires an unbelievable amount of water. And that's why they need our water. That's one of the main reasons they need our water, and they want it now. Now, this twin tunnel idea is ridiculous. Just 2 points, because these gentlemen have already kind of covered the obvious, but 2 things that bother me about it. Number one, the twin tunnel, they've done this $200 million study to figure out how much water they can take out of the Sacramento River without doing irreparable damage. And they figured it out, and guess what? They're putting in pumps that'll pump 50% more than that amount that would be the cutoff point of doing irreparable damage. So why do you think they're putting in such huge pumps for this? And secondly, and I think Ryan talked about this, how is this going to be paid for? Well, we're going to sell bonds and pay for it that way, but eventually those bonds have to be retired. And how is it going to be retired? The water companies in Southern California are going to pay for those bonds. And you know something? We're going to have a year with some drought, and there's going to be a crunch to pay those bonds, and there's going to be a real temptation to just ruin our environment by sending all our water south to pay those bonds. We've got to stop this. Now, why is this connected with the state of Jefferson? You remember about 20 years ago we went through this vote on the peripheral canal, and we defeated it. It's coming again. It's coming again because there's going to be enough controversy over this that there's going to be a public vote on what we do about this. And guess what? We're going to get outvoted by all those Southern California voters. Why don't we divide the state now before that vote comes, divide it so that the Northern California is the source of all that water, so that we can protect our water and not be outvoted by those people to the south. I think the time has come. We got to do it now. You know, the last state to divide like this was West Virginia and Virginia. That was over the issue of slavery. Well, I think water is an equally big, well, it's maybe not equally big, but it's certainly a really important issue that forces us to move and move now. So this is the sales pitch. We can convince the Republicans to do this. What we've got to do is convince the Democrats. I am the person, if elected to the Assembly, somebody's got to be in either the state Senate or the state Assembly pushing for this division of the state. There's got to be somebody that's behind it and pushing for it, and somebody who's not going to only be limited to talking to Republicans about it, because that's an easy sell. We need a Democrat that can convince Democrats that this is the right thing to do, and I'm the right person to do that. And I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Okay, if anybody wants to ask questions, please come on up here to the mic.
Yeah, this is to all of you. It's kind of a comment and a question altogether. It takes more than one issue to get my vote. Whether it be just water or be just whatever. I think we need a wider range of issues taken by each one of you. And do you agree or not?
Shall we just pass it down? It's in front of me. First of all, I certainly agree, and I invite everybody to visit my website, jimreed2014.com, because there's an issues section, and I try to hit all the really big issues. And if I had more time, I'd love to talk about it tonight. But that's what I would suggest you do, and I'm more than happy. You can then email me questions if you have questions about my specific stances. But I think I cover just about everything in the website.
Thank you. Yeah, you're right. There are a lot of issues. We see that every day in our life. Just drive through downtown. Just drive anywhere. Just open your phone bill, open your power bill, and look at your power bill. You see all the different fees and all the charges on there? That's mind-boggling. There are a lot of different issues. We've got AB 109, putting criminals back on our streets. We've got our schools that need some more local control and some more help. We've got a lot of issues on the plate. If you take a look at my website, which is ryanshore.com, you'll find some of those issues there as well. And one of the things I want to do in Sacramento is have staff that is dedicated to certain issues, so that person can run point on that issue. So it may be water and air quality. We can talk about those kinds of things with that person so that they have a good handle on it. I want to have an open office for you to be able to reach out to any one of us and make those kinds of things happen and run it up through those bureaucracies and try to solve those types of problems. But there are certainly a lot of issues that we can talk about that need to be addressed in this state. The list is mighty long.
I agree. There's a whole host of issues that we're dealing with in California, and I'm not sure which issues the gentleman was most interested in. But as we've said, I think education is a huge issue. How we're doing our education. This education system has become so focused on whether or not kids meet the A through G requirements, and everybody be on this college path instead of what education was really supposed to be about: teaching kids how to learn. How to learn more about their world, how to become informed, and how to be productive members of our society. How to go out and work, and learn a trade, learn how to do something and leave a legacy for your family. We need to reform our education system to do just that. Public safety realignment, huge issue. 40,000 prisoners being felons released into our local communities. Our sheriffs need to have the flexibility to send some of those bad guys back to state prison. And there again is also federal interference. The federal government came in and closed and basically shut down or took over our federal prisons and said, you shall reduce population, right? And so now they're coming in. Now these people are in our communities and we're having to deal with them. We have to be able to address that. We need to give our local sheriffs the flexibility to deal with that and the resources to deal with that. There's many others. I think the other thing, though, is that as much as there are many issues, there's also issues that have to be taken care of first in order to open up what we need to do. And regulation is the biggest one. We are the most regulated state. You can't do anything without asking permission from somebody or forgiveness later. And it should not be. That's not freedom. That's not what our founders intended. We need to get back to a limited form of government that enhances freedom and free enterprise.
My name is Trish, and my question, I've got a question for Ryan, because we've talked before, but my question extends actually all three of you. So I'm going to do kind of a two-part. So last time I talked to you, Ryan, the question to you was, where's your stance on Monsanto, and how do you feel about them genetically modifying our foods and without testing, handing it out to our kids, distributing it to us, no labeling, no choices? How do you feel about it? Have you looked into it?
Thank you for the question. I'm very familiar with it, and I've had a chance to explore a lot of the Midwest, visit with a lot of farmers and a lot of families who grow genetically engineered crops. I'm a huge believer in science and in medicine, and there's a tremendous amount of testing that goes into genetically engineering crops. I've been to some of the research facilities. They can develop a new genetically engineered plant in about 12 hours, but the testing and regulatory steps take 12 years. I'm confident in our scientists that work in private enterprise. I'm confident in our scientists at the FDA that we are having the safest, healthiest, and most affordable food supply in the nation. So I'm a big believer in science and in commerce and in industry solving some of the problems that exist in the world today. And I'm a proponent. I've seen them with my own eyes. I know how the science works. I know how they work on our farms. I know farmers use less fuel, less fertilizer, and spare the environment in quite a few different ways. They're more productive with those types of tools and technology, and I think that's how we're going to feed the world moving forward into the next 100 years. So farmers have done a lot of things with genetic engineering for a long time. If you look at some of the trees here that we have in the valley, they're grafted on a completely different type of rootstock. We've got almonds on peaches or prune rootstock. We've got livestock that have been bred to different breeds to create hybrid vigor. We've got all kinds of things going on right here in Butte County at the Rice Experiment Station. Though not genetically engineered, they're doing some great things with science and technology to develop safe, affordable, healthy foods. So I'm a huge believer and a huge proponent of it. Now, there is a choice. There's organics. And organics cannot be, by definition, genetically engineered products. So I think that's great to have those types of chains in the marketplace. If people want to subscribe to the notion of organic food that's been not altered by genetically engineering technology, they can. Or if they want to choose the other path, they're certainly free to choose that as well. But again, I'm a huge believer. I know the science. I've visited the labs. I've seen the good that they can do, and I've fought hard to make sure that our farmers and businesses have the choice to plant those should they so desire, because I know I've seen firsthand the positive impact they have on communities and on the environment. And I'd be happy to put you in touch with people so that you can reach out and go to those labs and see for yourself. It's an eye-opening experience, and it's super exciting. I know if it was a life or death situation, I'd want my son or daughter to have the best technology possible and not let some government agency say, no, you can't do that. And I'll give you an example. My wife might be able to testify to this. West Nile virus. We have an equine virus, an equine vaccine rather, that we can give to our horses that's been genetically modified that can save our horses' lives because of that equine vaccine that's been manufactured using genetically engineered technology. We don't have that for humans. I think that's a travesty. That our scientists can give it to humans, but because of the regulatory phase, we can't. So we have people dying from West Nile virus, but we can give our horses a shot or have the vet do it. So that's the kind of technology. I don't want somebody to tell me in the future something bureaucrat dreamed up that my kid can't have his life spared, because we're going to say no to that arbitrarily without looking at the facts, without looking at the science. So I'm a huge believer in it. I'll go on the record all day long as being a tremendous supporter of the companies, the innovators, the scientists behind that.
Are you aware that Monsanto is actually one of the leading contributors to Agenda 21?
I wasn't aware of that, but there's lots of companies that are involved in genetic engineering.
Did you know also that the president of the FDA is the former vice president of Monsanto, and they have a revolving door system going on?
I have been made aware of all those kinds of things in the media, yes.
So my question actually extends also to both of you, the remaining. How do you guys feel about that?
I don't know specifically about Monsanto, and I certainly don't agree with everything that they contribute to or do. But let's just, I think the basic gist of the question is this. If you live in the United States, and especially if you live in California, thank your lucky stars, because you have the most abundant and safe food in the world, period, bar none, end of the story. And the reason for that is brought to you by science and technology that has allowed us to increase our yields. And as such, we are a food exporter. We feed the world. And people around the world are eating healthier, better food because of that science and technology. So I think we really need to stay clear of what I think is a lot of scare tactics out there about, Franken food and all this other stuff. This is the safest and healthiest food in the world, and it's so because we have developed technologies that are safe. As Ryan said, there is a marketplace for organic food. And, I'm green. If you can do that and make money green, then good for you. That's what this country is about and this marketplace is about. A lot of people take advantage of that. I will say this, if everybody was growing organic, there's going to be a lot of hungry people, not only in the United States, but in the entire world. We need to have conventional agriculture, and we need to take advantage of technology. God gave us a brain for a reason.
Well, because I have a science and engineering background, I can't really disagree with either Ryan or James about the fact that there may be some genetic engineering that could be actually quite beneficial. But having said that, there's two things I want to point out. Number one is there is absolutely no reason why, if they're going to have a genetically engineered type of food, that it's not labeled that way so we can choose whether we want to use it or not. There is no reason we should not have it labeled. Secondly, and I listening to Ryan and James talk earlier about smaller government and overregulation and that sort of thing, regulation has its place. And if we're going to allow scientists to create genetically engineered crops, we've got to make absolutely sure that those crops don't cross into other fields and become spread, changing all crops into genetically engineered crops. We've got to regulate the heck out of the genetic engineering science and business.
Hi, I'm Sue Boatman, and just before I ask my question, I have a comment about GMOs. We have a farm down from us that has GMO corn and GMO alfalfa, and I know the bees that visit there visit my garden, and I'm not very happy about that. I've seen what other countries have done. They have outlawed Monsanto seed. Mexico just said no to Monsanto. They're pretty smart. Okay, my question is, what happened to the proposal to build Auburn Dam? I know monies are sitting in Sacramento. What happens to that money? Why did the dam never get built?
I think bureaucracy and I think politics played a large part in that. And I think that was a federal project, and that was way back when I was just a small boy. And as I recall, there was a coffer dam in place where they had envisioned putting the Auburn Dam that washed out during the flood of '86 and the weather event that we had that winter. And there wasn't the funds even available or allocated to put that back in. I'd be happy to get back to whomever that was, if you want to give me your information with the answers on that. I think that is something that, if it offers us some affordable flood protection, could generate some new water, that's something we ought to look into. And obviously, there's been a lot of work done on that, just like there has on Sites Reservoir. That's a dam I visited, the proposed site just today. $60 million in studies over the better part of 2 decades. It's crazy. So if we can take advantage of some things like that already exist, we need to look into that. But I'm willing to do that. If you give me your information, I'd be happy to make sure you had the answers on that. Thank you.
Auburn Dam, it died because of the environmental lobby and because of seismic issues. They identified that there was seismic issues in that area, and so they were worried about its... I'm not sure about the monies, and I'll have to look into that and obviously get back to you on that issue. But that is the reason why it was killed, and is probably, not going to happen. And that's why I think our best bet to get water storage in the North State is Sites Reservoir.
Hi, I'm Sue Peters, and my question is, I heard on the television yesterday that desalination is now down to like $8 for acre feet, and that the people in Southern California on the average use half an acre foot a year in their homes. Why, with the new technology for filtration, why instead of taking our water, don't they build some plants? The ocean has plenty of water out there, and they could leave us ours and they could have all they need. Any comments?
Absolutely. If you don't mind, I'll go first on that. I'm excited to get these kind of questions. I love this. So if you can think of more, please fire away. This is the kind of stuff that I want to go to Sacramento and make sure that your voice is heard. But you asked about desalinization. I had a chance to speak with one of the executives at the Metropolitan Water District, which is a water wholesaler to much smaller districts in Southern California. So they help facilitate transfers and generating water and power and getting it to Southern California and then distributing it to smaller districts like San Diego and Orange County and so forth. So this gentleman told me that it costs $1,000 an acre foot to desalinate water because of energy costs and so forth. And when you add the environmental regulations and the energy regulations and the land use regulations that pile up on building and studying and designing seismic activity, all that, if you compile all that stuff with the regulations, it doubles the cost. It's almost $2,400 an acre foot if you were to put a plant in right now today, $2,400 an acre foot. So that's why there's huge demand on our water up north, because they think they can source it, convey it, and get it there cheaper than doing desalinization. That came right from the office of the Metropolitan Water District's executive office team. So if you have some other information that says it's $8 an acre foot, I'd love to know about that. And maybe with nuclear power and some of those other things, there's ways to reduce that cost.
They said that I don't know how it was being done, but it would provide its own energy. They would have more energy than what they would use. They could sell off the energy.
I tell you, many of our farmers here pay upwards of $30, $40 an acre to irrigate their crops. So if there was a solution like that out there that was viable, I think it would be already being done if that was truly the cost. And maybe there's a place somewhere in the world where that's being done for that price. I'd love to know, and like I said, I'd be happy to put you in touch with the folks that have tried to do it. They've tried to build a plant in Southern California recently, and believe it or not, the surfing lobby has had a huge impact on that. And they worry about the warm water coming out of the power plants and out of this process to generate the desalinized water and what its effect would be on the ocean and everything else. So like I said, that's coming straight from the executive offices of the Metropolitan Water District, doubling the cost because of California's burdensome regulations and just the time, the planning, and that's crazy. And there's talk, I've heard rumblings of actually Mexico putting in a plant and being able to ship water north because they can get around some of the regulatory hurdles. Talk about a travesty. But I'd be happy, if you want to give me information, I'd be happy to see what we can do to put you in touch with some of those other folks, and maybe you have something that you could share with them.
But here's the thing, and this goes back to what I was talking about earlier when I say the next big need in Southern California for a tremendous amount of water is going to be fracking. And there is no reason, because fracking is going to be a very, very lucrative business for the oil companies. There's no reason why they can't go to the extra expense of desalting the water out of the ocean to supply that water rather than stealing ours and sucking us dry.
Well, just to add to what's already been said, I think that we need to make Southern California invest in more of their water infrastructure. And one of those things is desalinization. The technology is there, and I think they should invest to help, instead of taking from our water supply, they should invest in increasing their water supply, and they can do it through desalinization. The other thing that they can do is that they have many groundwater basins down in Southern California that they could utilize to store water and that they could use in times of need. The problem with those is they're contaminated. They need to be cleaned up. Again, if they put the investment into cleaning up those groundwater basins, they'd have more water for Southern California, and that'd be better for us because it'd be less of a drag on our water rights up here. So I think those are two great ways that we can help protect our water rights. And also, look, I don't think anybody's really against Southern California. We just want them to take care of what's theirs, and we want to take care of what's ours.
All right. When Ryan was talking, he mentioned common sense 4 or 5 times in his presentation. And I kind of triggered something because common sense means a lot to a lot of different people. Now, as a politician, it's a term of common sense lately. Core is common sense education. Obamacare is common sense health care. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that just isn't common sense to me. So my question is what is your guys' definition of common sense?
Exactly. It's certainly not Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. When we're raising insurance premiums and creating new bureaucracies and limiting access to health care, that's not common sense. Common sense is making it easier for our kids to get a good education with local control. Common sense is making sure more of your hard-earned paycheck or your family's paycheck is left in your pocket. Making sure that we don't go grow government and grow government powers. Making sure that you have more control here locally over your destiny. I think that's what's really important. It's common sense. It's knowing that that it takes a community of people who are wanting to go out and make good things happen, to let them do that. If they want to have direction of their schools or start a charter school, let them have that opportunity. Let them have opportunity. An individual, start a business, build the American dream, what it takes to do that. I mean, it's common sense, I guess, and a little of it simple as the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. And sometimes I think in the fog of Sacramento's tall buildings and the shade they create, people forget the common sense. Water flows downhill. It takes power and water and things like that if we're going to increase the size of California's population. And as has been mentioned here tonight, when's the last time we've had a project that generated new water? There's been a lot of water projects in the state, but generating new water, generating new power, how many? It's common sense. We're going to put more houses in. We've got to do something to feed those people that are building those homes. Let them have jobs. Let them grow businesses. That's the kind of common sense that I'm talking about. We've got to have affordable energy to put in our cars. This $5, $6 a gallon that you see advertised on TV doesn't work. Common sense, it means let's not spend $1 to gain 90 cents. That's the kind of government spending that's been going on, it seems like, when we invest in businesses like Solyndra, so forth. It's a government grant over here to finance some crazy project over here, and the whole thing costs a ton of money, and it goes broke. And it breaks our treasury. That's the kind of common sense that Washington tries to, and Sacramento tries to parlay to us here locally, and we've got to get back. No, the numbers doesn't add up. The math doesn't add up. It's like building the twin tunnels. Same thing. Where are they going to get the water to put in them and feed the Delta? State Water Resource Control Board wants another 1 million acre feet. Why don't they talk about that in the project? Those two entities aren't talking together. That's the common sense. Got to have more water before you put it in the tunnels.
So second part of that question for all three of you guys is, how are you going to relay that common sense to Sacramento?
That's a good question. My intent is to help with that message by bringing folks here to let them see what's really going on locally. Let them hear our concerns and see them, visualize them firsthand. Again, it goes back to the shade of those tall buildings. And when you're up on the 50th floor or someplace dreaming up new regulations, sometimes you don't have a clue what's really going on in the real world. Get in the pickup, go for a ride, figure it out. Go talk to people up and down the creek. See what's really going on. See the problems that bureaucracy creates. Go take a tour of the schools. Go talk to the parents. Have a town hall. Come to meetings like this. Let's listen to what the real concerns are out there. But too often people get wrapped up in the bureaucracy and they forget about that. I've heard politicians say that they love being there. That's crazy. We got to get people out here, back to the real world. Not dreaming up new things so they can have a name on a plaque or the name on a freeway someplace. Get back to the real world. And that's why I like it when these folks come up here from the California Air Resources Board, or the Department of Water Resources, or the Resources Secretary, so that we all have an opportunity to have our concerns addressed by them. Because I don't think they get it when they're at a town hall in LA. I think they have a very myopic view of the world. We got to broaden their horizons a little bit. Bring them out here where the water is clean and the air is fresh. People know how to grow food. People know how to do things. So that's the kind of common sense that I'm talking about. The kind of common sense that we exhibit in our daily lives as we go about leading them. So thank you for your question.
So I was at a similar candidates night to this, but it was different type of candidates, and there were two candidates running for sheriff, and one of them had a very good education, and one of them not so good. And so one of the supporters of the guy that that didn't have the great education got up and said, "Well, isn't common sense a lot more important than education?" And another candidate, not running for sheriff, leaned over next to me and said, "Yeah, I'm for common sense." And so, yes, I'm for common sense, whatever it is.
The first question is, what is common sense? I think the founders referred to it as natural law. You know, it is what what used to be obvious to everyone before the imposition of the modern educational system. But how are we going to convey that common sense? Well, I think it's building relationships with people. Yeah, you know, there's a lot of people down there that think a lot differently than us. But I think their constituents are really starting to wake up and say, hey, it's not right that I'm having to sell my truck. It's a perfectly good truck because of these regulations, you know. Hey, it's not right that I don't get to keep the money that I earned. You know, and I think a lot of people are waking up to that. And when people wake up to that, politicians respond. I heard Assemblyman Logue he said today, you know, politicians spell respect F-E-A-R. If they fear the people, then they'll do the right thing. And I think we're starting to see that in California. You see that in the Andy Vidak race down in the Central Valley, where Republican Andy Vidak won that seat even though it had a Democratic registration majority. Just last Tuesday, there was a special election down in Los Angeles County, district that everyone thought is going to be dominated Democrat. It's a very close race, 150 votes separating the Republican from the Democrat right now. Doing those kind of things long term, I think we can win the fight. We can get more people, freedom-minded people elected, and we can do what we need to do down in Sacramento.
Jim, did you have an answer on how we can bring common sense to Sacramento?
Nothing other than what I said, but you know, as the Democrat in the group, and again, back to the state of Jefferson for a minute, where we've got to convince Democrats to support the idea. You know, if you're gonna, in asking for your vote, if you were gonna support a Democrat for that reason, you might as well support a Democrat who also feels strongly about no gun regulations, strong defender of the Second Amendment, and somebody who favors the death penalty and in fact wants to streamline the death penalty.
Go ahead, Sally.
Yes, today in the Senate, they voted 52 to 48 to do away with the filibuster. And that's basically what you guys are walking down into in Sacramento. Even if we elect you, you will be in the minority. You won't have any power down there, just like the Republicans in the Senate. And I would like to know what you two Republicans think about the state of Jefferson, because it seems to me like that's the only way that we will ever get back our representation up here.
Well, I think to the first point, you know, we've talked about it a little bit tonight. We've alluded to it, like, well, hey, it doesn't really matter Republican or Democrat. You know, it does matter, okay? Because it is the Democrats who have brought you Obamacare, okay? It is the Democrats who have brought you all this regulation that's limiting your freedoms, okay? And I know that Jim doesn't, you know, march in step with them, but I'm sorry, his party is responsible for taking away our freedoms in this country and in this state, and they've led us into debt, $148 billion in debt in the state of California. And so, yes, you do need to elect Republican. I think the Republican Party is the best hope for this state and for this nation. As far as the state of Jefferson, I fully support the Jefferson declarations because we need to send a message down to Sacramento that we don't feel represented. You know, and I think it's a little bit turned on its head when we were saying, well, we need more representation at the federal level. No, we have plenty of representation at the federal level. The problem is we don't have much representation at the state level. The last thing we need is 2 more Barbara Boxers in the state Senate, or sorry, the U.S. Senate. We don't need any more of those. What we need is more people that understand freedom and that understand our rural values up here in the North State, our water, and those things. And I think we can do that. I haven't given up. I'm obviously running to be your representative in the state of California. So I do believe that we can make this change, that we can take this state back. I know it's a long road, but I would ask you to fight with me and let's get it done. Let's not give up.
Could we ask you to fight with us also in trying to form the state of Jefferson?
Yeah, like I said, I support it. I support the Jefferson Declarations.
I'm glad you asked the question about how in Sacramento a Republican, being in the minority, I talked about it a little bit earlier, could make a difference for the North State in Sacramento. And if you recall, I talked about the Capitol being one building where they make that legislation, but so many other boards and offices and commissions and bureaus in the buildings that surround the Capitol interpret those rules, given that power by the legislature and politicians to dream up new rules and regulations, and CARB is a prime example of that. They've talked about going well beyond the scope with the California Air Resources Board and AB 32 and the cap and trade and the auctions and all that, gone well beyond the scope, I think, that the legislature intended. And so I think that as a guy with an R behind my name, not only can we reach out to some of those moderate folks that are coming from some of the suburban districts in the East Bay and maybe Southern California, but we can do a lot of good work and all those boards and bureaus and commissions and agencies that surround the Capitol, because there's very little accountability currently in the legislature of how they spend their money, how they dream up those new rules and regulations, and that's something that I want to go after. We need more accountability, more oversight of those employees, how they spend their money, how they dream up that new regulation. Oftentimes it's with closed door meetings, and I've been to some of them at 5 o'clock on Friday night, the Friday before Labor Day. That's when they were dreaming up some of these things called the Irrigated Lands Waiver Program. That was their public comment period. Friday night before Labor Day at 5 o'clock at the Holiday Inn in Chico. I think that's not transparency. That's disingenuous. And we're paying for that. And that goes back to kind of common sense. Somebody asked that question about common sense. You don't have a public comment period on a Friday night at 5 o'clock on Labor Day weekend at the Holiday Inn in Chico. You got to have a little different attitude and a little different approach with all those boards and bureaus and commissions. That's one of the things, no matter what you have behind your name, you can do. And I want to go do that because there's great room for improvement there. And accountability, bringing that back to the legislature, bringing that back to real people here in the communities is important. The other thing you asked about was the State of Jefferson Declaration. I think it's a great thing, the attention that it has brought to our concerns here in Northern California, and I support it because of that. And if that's what we end up having to do to send that message to the state of California, that's what we need to do. Because otherwise, our voice is not going to be heard. If we continue down the path and our rights are going to be trampled upon, we can't let that happen. And the Constitution, frankly, allows for it.
Yes.
So if we're going to be true to our word, we best not pick and choose. Best follow it. So again, I applaud and appreciate your efforts, and thank you very much for the question about what we can do as a Republican. So to summarize, in addition, reaching out to those folks, bringing them here, and working with all those agencies that are dreaming up new rules and regulations that have huge impact on us financially here in Northern California. Thank you.
Go that first. Okay, so this is back to the previous question. So we're just getting to know each other up here, but what I'm hearing both of them say when it comes to the state of Jefferson is they support the declaration because it sends a message to Sacramento. That's what I hear them saying. That's different than what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is working to make it happen. That's what I will do, is work to separate the state of California into what I believe is 3 states. Thank you.
One other question, follow-up on water. I have a water question. Are you familiar with the Integrated Regional Water Management Plan?
Can you say that again?
Are you familiar with the Integrated Regional Water Management Plan and how it works and how the money comes into our county and how the strings that come along with it are attached and how it's also part of Agenda 21 regional government? plan.
I've got lots to say about water, and that's certainly one of the subjects that I am pretty well versed on. And I say that because, as you may know, it sounds like you're well versed on it as well, the state of California has been encouraging folks to plan their water out on a regional basis, and that involves several counties here in the North State. Now, what's interesting about that is the state of California chooses the criteria as to who will receive grants in that process. And so that criteria was met with a grant application. And so the state of California, through the Department of Water Resources, through some of the bonds that were approved in California, funded this application by these counties to go into this, this integrated regional water management plan. And so now they've come up with a list of projects that they want to see occur here in Northern California. Maybe it's a fish screen, maybe it's whatever it might be, a pet project of a water district, or even
Sykes Reservoir.
there's lots of different things in there. But what I think is a travesty about that is that when I looked on the list of proposed projects the other day, the state of California and their various entities, California Department of Fish and Game, or Fish and Wildlife as it is now, we paid millions to change that name, but that's another story. They have lots of projects on there that they're now trying to compete with for funding, competing against us, against legitimate projects. And I think that's crazy. If they get to pick the rules that fund the whole thing, pick the criteria, and then they submit their projects then to their various agencies to compete against legitimate projects that are of serious concern and have big consequences that could actually improve the lot of folks here locally. And that's crazy. And some of it has to be done, and the money's spent because of all the regulations that are dreamt up by those boards and bureaus and agencies and commissions and all that. And that's bordering on insanity. I mean, that's the fox guarding the hen house. If you get to pick the criteria, you get to allocate the funding, and then you get to submit the application and try to compete through one of your other little agencies, that's crazy. That's my take on it.
Yes, I've been involved with this for several years now, having been a member of the Sutter County Board of Supervisors. And the way I first actually got involved in it is because in Sutter County, there was a proposal to regulate groundwater. And I fought against that, and we actually stopped that from happening in Sutter County. Other counties had done that where they had regulated groundwater. They actually stopped people from using their own groundwater. So I 100% support protecting our water rights. I believe that, you know, the water that's beneath and the water that you help produce, the surface water that you help develop, you have a right to, and that somebody should not interfere with that right. And so what happened is that the state of California had started going around saying, well, you have to start doing these regional plans if you want to get money for your infrastructure, water infrastructure projects, you know. And so a lot of, you know, we need water infrastructure, period, you know, in this state, whether it's in Southern California or Northern California. And we have these problems where, you know, water districts that provide the water to all the farms, to our cities, et cetera, have to put in these expensive fish screens. They shouldn't have to do that in the first place, right? I'm 100% on board with that. But I got involved with it because I wanted to ensure that whatever did happen and whatever came out of that was going to protect our local and private water rights. And so I, as a Sutter County Supervisor, sat on that board when it was initially started. The positive thing about that board is that it is our local counties, our local representatives. It's not the state of California, which is what they had proposed to do initially. This is the state was going to come in and form this regional plan for us. Absolutely not. That was going to be a non-starter. That's why you saw a lot of the counties come together to do that.
But you
I'm not on that board anymore. I'm still watching it very closely because I want to make sure that it's not going to have these strings attached to it. And I know about the Prop 84 and the Prop 13 grants. We had a proposal in Sutter County where they were going to take a Prop 84 grant. Myself and other board members killed that because of the strings that are attached to it. And I think you always have to watch that.
Yes.
When you know, we need water projects. We need Sykes Reservoir. You know, I'm hoping to do that without that grant. We need to do that through a bond that's going to be on the ballot. That's kind of a side note, but there's $3 billion in a water bond right now for water storage. If that $3 billion doesn't stay in there, Sites is probably not going to get built. They're talking about reducing that to $1 billion right now down in Sacramento. If that does that, it's going to kill that water storage project. It won't happen.
I think it's always a problem when you divide and take away your own county sovereignty by getting involved with other counties, because then it divides it by 6
Yeah.
or however many counties are involved. It gives away your power, and it always comes with strings attached.
Yeah, and really all that's happened so far on that is they've identified projects. That's it. They haven't set any policy on what's going to happen or what's not going to happen. And one thing that we always talk about, at least when I was on the board, is look, whatever Sutter County wants, they need to have their priority and jurisdiction over that.
Don't
And
ever
whatever
give away
Glenn
your
County
county
wants,
power.
yeah, yeah. Believe
Thank
me,
you.
I jealously guard our local sovereignty. Yeah. I
Okay.
couldn't. Another board member was appointed for the next year, so I still want to be involved in it. I'm still watching it very closely, but I wasn't appointed to the board for this. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Even the Democrats are concerned about health care reform, and even the Democrats don't realize what they've really gotten us into. As an insurance agent that signs with Covered California, you sign a Darfur certification. Darfur is in the country of Sudan. An insurance agent in the state of California is governed by the California Department of Insurance. I am an insurance agent. The Department of Insurance in California knows where I do business. I am not signing with the Covered California. I will not sign a Darfur certification. That is not a requirement of the state of California. That is a requirement that's coming from the federal government. And there's a lot more attached to it than that. My concern for this evening is if the insurance agents are being required to sign a Darfur certification, and there's more into that than we know, what professions are next? Are the doctors then going to be signing, or are they already signing? Because we do know that the doctors are required to practice differently. And the networks are being narrowed. So there's a lot of legislation that is occurring that is beyond the state of California. Even the Democrats don't realize what they've gotten us into. So that is my number one question is, what professions are next? And in addition to that, when you come into office, how is it that you gain the confidence and the trust of the people? We're so skeptical of everything. So how is it? And I have a 15-year-old son. He participates in a lot of community leadership. He is almost becoming a minority. How is it that our children, with our grandparents coming from foreign countries, my grandparents came from Finland, settled here in the 1800s, just like a lot of what you guys have said. Well, there are people here whose families are coming from foreign countries, and they are becoming the majority.
I just want to say, in this, obviously a Democrat in a room, mostly Republicans, the sense is that all regulation is bad, and that's just not true. And I don't, the question of, what profession is next, I don't know what to say about that, but here's the thing. There are regulations that are required, and this actually goes back to the previous question, where and James mentioned that he had voted against regulating and monitoring groundwater. Well, you know something? There are aquifers. There's different types of aquifers. There's the sponge aquifer, when the water comes out and then the water comes back in, it restores itself. But there's other kind of aquifers, including one in Butte County, that if the water is sucked out, it will collapse and there will never be an aquifer there again. We need to regulate the water in that aquifer, and that may, by the way, cross county lines. But we need to regulate that, because if that gets sucked out one time fully, it's gone forever. And that's why you have regulations, is you need protection in certain circumstances. I'm not saying that you must overregulate, or all. The point is, not all regulation is bad.
There was a few different things in there, but you know, I think the one thing that I highlighted on you is that our young people, you know, how important it is to teach them leadership skills and abilities. You know, one of the greatest things that I got to experience growing up was being in the Future Farmers of America program. You know, I learned hard work. I learned, you know, how to raise an animal. But I also was given leadership training. You know, I was able to go down to, they had a program called Sacramento Leadership Experience. And you went down there, you learned about the issues, you learned how, you know, our government works, you know, and I was just fascinated by that. You know, it gave me a vision for what, you know, I could do and how I could be an advocate for my people, right? It also taught parliamentary procedure. I mean, that's such a lost art now, right? Nobody knows the rules of how to govern and run a meeting. You know, these are things that we should be teaching our kids to ensure that they can be leaders and that they can go on into the future. So absolutely, I want to, you know, really work on ensuring that our kids have those leadership opportunities. You know, to Jim's point on regulation, I think the problem is Jim, it always starts out there like, oh, we're doing this because we know what's good for you. And, you know, what's good for you is that, you know, this aquifer, we need to do this and this. That's basically what they're saying with our surface water right now. They're saying, well, you know, that water you guys are using up here, that's good, all well and good, but it'd be a lot better if it was going down here to help the fish down in the Delta, you know, and that, you know, and hey, there's more people down here in Southern California, so the public interest is better served by that, you know, and nobody remembers that, hey, we're dealing with property rights here, and that those property rights have to be respected and guarded. And that's part of what, you know, our government was set up to do. I don't think anybody's saying that there's not, you know, sometimes reason to do things in order to protect. You know, I mean, in my own water district, South Sutter Water District, we didn't have any surface water. Everything was groundwater, and we started to have people, you know, their wells went dry. So that community banded together locally and said, hey, well, what we need to do is we need to invest in surface water storage, and we did. We built, you know, the Bear River Camp Far West Reservoir, and we're part of that, and we get water from there, and now that helps supplement groundwater. And, you know, that was local people coming together to solve a problem rather than the big bureaucracy coming in and giving the solution for you. And that's where I think we need to go, rather than, you know, this kind of one-size-fits-all regulatory regime, which is what we have in California right now.
You talked about Darfur initially. Let me answer your question. I kind of go back to what I said earlier. I want to make sure that our doctors, our insurance agents are left to the business at hand, not worrying about Darfur. So let's get that clear. When I go to the doctor or my wife or family or whoever, I want that doctor to be worried about making sure that he's doing what's best for us. Not some government bureaucracy, not signing some paperwork and getting fined because he didn't cross the T and dot the I on a Darfur certificate. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? I think that's important. Let's worry about him or her doing their job to make our families safe and healthy. Let's not give so much credibility to something like that. The other thing you asked about was youth and our communities and leadership. I'm a few years older than James, went through some of those same programs. Matter of fact, went a little higher even, was elected to serve as a state FFA officer, Future Farmers of America, took a year off, went to high school, graduated, and was elected by my peers to travel up and down the state, visited about 100 high schools, encouraging students to get involved in career development, leadership, and so forth through agricultural education, to make students leaders in their communities, because ultimately those are the people who will go on to make our communities strong, safe, and healthy, and make the important decisions that are good for our communities here locally. So we've got to make sure that our farm team, if you will, no pun intended, is strong. We've got to make sure that there's a group of folks who want to go on and do good in the community. So it's important to have things like the FBLA and like the Future Farmers of America in our high school to keep those types of farm teams in place so that when they come up through the ranks, that they have that leadership skill, they have the respect of their peers, they know how to handle themselves in a room of people, and they learn the parliamentary procedure and some of those things. It's just so many valuable things that are important to our youth in their development, I think, that we can do in our high schools if it's encouraged and promoted. And I think that's a great thing. So like I encourage some of those partnerships to move forward and develop those leaders. The other thing you asked about, and I think I'm going to hit all three of your questions, is how do you know we'll be won't turn into another politician or another bureaucrat? I think is that kind of along the lines you were going? Yeah. Well, I think it happened here tonight a little bit. I was asked a question about Monsanto, and I called it like I saw it, like I've experienced. I want to be frank and forthright with every one of you in this room. And that's what you're going to get from me. That's the way I was raised. That's the way I grew up. That's the way I think it ought to be in Sacramento or Washington. We may disagree, but let's be frank and forthright with one another. And I think that's just as important. That's a two-way street. It's not all sending somebody to Sacramento, not giving them the tools they need to go and fight and do what's right. I'm going to keep doing what I've always done. I'm going to come home on the weekends, live underneath the laws that are created down there. Get my boots dirty, get in my pickup, get on my John Deere, plant the crops, harvest the crops, send them to town. That's what I love to do. And that's who I am. I want to have this opportunity to serve in Sacramento, help set our community back on the right path, help fight the good fight in Sacramento. I don't want to give up. I'm not giving up yet. I don't want anybody in this room to give up either. And I'm going to relish the opportunity. And I don't want somebody to put your honor or the honorable such and such on an envelope, because it's really your seat. It's your honor that our forefathers fought for, to have the kind of democratic republic that we do today. It's a privilege to serve there. It's not something to grow bureaucrats and create power bureaus and whatever else in Sacramento. It's an honor and a privilege, and it should be respected as such. And you come home and you live underneath the laws and rules that you create. It's a good question. Thank you.
Yeah, Bonnie's question was great. You know, I mean, that's really where it's at. How do we know we can believe what you say? And I'm a simple guy. Okay, I'm just going to make a couple of observations. Sometimes when you're endorsed by a lot of people, it doesn't matter. Ask Rick Bassetti. Another thing, too, sometimes when you talk to somebody, it's sort of like they seem to be forming their next question to you or what they want to say while you're talking to them, so they don't get it straight. The debt in California is not $148 billion. As of October the 20th at 11:15 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, it's $418,891,705,955. Don't have that. But our state senator made the observation that that's unbelievable, that's unsustainable. It isn't a matter of whether or not the state of Jefferson can be something that can survive, but can California? And in about a 25-minute conversation, there was a lot of things that came up, and I won't go into that and waste your time. But, you know, really and truly, we want our representatives to be honest with us. You know, Ryan, I could tell, I looked in your eyes, looks like you believe what you say. I don't know whether you'll be compromised down there. You will be, a bit. But the point is that it looks like you mean what you say. When your wife walked in, you kind of lit up. Your confidence level went up. That's an interesting thing. And Jim, a couple things about state of Jefferson. I did the interview with CBS. I talked to Barry Peterson. I sat down with him for an hour and a half. And there's going to be a sequel to that. And that was not a great interview. That was not a great situation. And Oregon is not involved from us, because I just want to clue you in on this. Oregon cannot withdraw from the state of California. They're Oregon. So basically, there's that. The other thing is, too, is that maybe what you guys ought to look at when you think about the state of Jefferson is two court cases. One I think you're familiar with already, which is Reynolds versus Sims, one man, one vote. But the other one is Brown versus Thompson. You guys can just look that one up. My question is that how do you gain trust in us when you're going to go into a situation where our own state senator is telling us there's nothing really we can do at this point except fight the good fight, elect more Republicans? How do you do that? Tell me how we elect more Republicans. Reach across the aisle. Well, no one will work with me. So how does that work? So really, maybe it's unfixable. And I want to ask you about that, how you really think you really can fix it. How can you really make a difference? It's one thing believing what you can say. It's a whole other reality in being able to do it. So really, how about some common sense things on how you can do it, what you're going to do, and those types of things. And the last thing I want to ask you is that when you have a situation where we have basically no voice whatsoever, which we don't have. And I remember a phone call on September the 3rd, 2013. I got a phone call from Mark Baird. He said, Terry, if Siskiyou County doesn't go with a declaration of Jefferson, we're dead in the water. Okay? 4-1 the next day. 10 days later, Modoc County, 4-0. Week and a half later, I got a call from CBS, Fox News. Then after that, a couple calls from Jim. Then after that, we get a call from Glenn County. Jim was saying, well, you know, the state of Jefferson. What is the state of Jefferson? We're getting calls from San Bernardino. It's going to look like a fish hook. Nobody really even knows at this point. There's 17 counties in play. But I guess the thing that kind of bothers me is a lot of the statistics and things that come out are not being studied by the people who are elected. Here that lady comes up and she talks about a water board situation where half the people that were on that board had never even read Proposition 84. I know, I was at every meeting. So really and truly, when the pedal hits the metal, what is it you guys really think you can do and what is it you're going to promise? And that's my question.
And you know, and previously, what Ms. Morgan brought up as well is that, you know, how do you establish that trust, right? Because, you know, as our founding documents attest to, all power is derived from the consent of the governed, right? And so we have to convince the governed that, hey, we're the right person to represent your interests down in Sacramento. So how do I do that? Well, part of it is what we're doing right here, because you're hearing directly from us what we think on the issues. I'm telling you exactly what I think, what I believe, what I'll fight for, and so are Ryan and Jim. And you are going to make that decision, hey, who do I trust to really get that done? What I can tell you about me is I have a record of doing it, okay? I've been in this fight ever since I was young. I was in the fight at UC Berkeley, and I helped win the day down there. We got conservatives to win the day down there. We got more Republicans involved. We helped change that campus. You know, so I've been in that fight where it was a dark place, you know. I've been in there on Proposition 8, where I was co-chair in Sutter County, where we helped get the signatures and the grassroots and got people to put that on the ballot so that we could win the day on that issue. I've been there on we talked about this, the transgender student bill. You know, I've been out there gathering signatures and working in the grassroots because I'm doing that battle with people. I think people can trust me because they know I've been there, because I continue to do that fight. When we talk about pension reform and the need to do something about our pension debt, I did it in Sutter County. I've been part of that. You know, and I want to just paraphrase it. We did it. Because everything I've ever been able to accomplish, I did it with working with other people just like yourself, you know, who are gathering information, who are coming to me and saying, hey, this is what we really need to do. Do you understand that this is what, you know, really the debt is? And, you know, I apologize. Sometimes I need to be told things a couple of times. So I got that number wrong. But the bottom line is we do it together. And I've been in the trenches doing that fight, and I believe that we can take this state back. And how are we going to do that? Well, yes, we have to win elections if we want to change this state around. And that means hard work. It means walking precincts. It means making telephone calls. I went down to Visalia to walk precincts for Andy Vidak because I believe that much in it. I took a carload of people down there, and we walked precincts all day. And there were people up here, Butte County Young Republicans sent a group of 20 young kids down there to walk precincts. We had people on the phones up here making those phone calls, and that's the kind of effort it's going to take. And if we're not ready to sign up for that and to do that, then yeah, you're right. You can expect more of the same. But I'm not going to be willing to do that. And you're right. Talk is cheap, and the stakes are high, especially right now. You know, and right now the unfortunate thing is that we're all talking, you know, because we're having to tell you what we think we can do. But what the proof will be in the pudding. And what I want to commit to you is that I will not come back here and say how bad things are. Oh, things are so bad, and I just can't get anything done. I'll quit unless I come back here and I can tell you, look, I got this done for you. I moved the ball down the court. Now, I'm not going to promise you, because it would be ridiculous for me to say, yeah, I'm going to go down there, I'm going to change this state in one term. It's not going to I can't throw a touchdown pass out the gut. But I'll tell you what, I played high school football, and 5 yards in a cloud of dust gets you to the touchdown just as quickly. And I can commit to you right now, today, I will always be on there 5 yards in a cloud of dust, 5 yards in a cloud of dust until we get there. And I can just tell you that now, but I hope to be able to prove it to you and be here, 2 years from now, 4 years from now, to tell you what I've been able to accomplish and together that we've been able to do. So.
Good question, Terry, and thank you for pointing out the truth. And I think it starts with that. You mentioned $400 and some odd billion. $419
billion.
$419 billion.
5 times the amount we were told by Jim Nielsen and Brian Jones out of San Diego in November of 2011. It's gone up 5 times. That's unsustainable.
I think it starts with being honest. Honest in the negotiations, honest with relationships that you have with people. My grandfather and I farmed together while he was alive. He passed away a year ago, along with my dad. I was raised on our family farm, like I said, end of a gravel road. At the risk of my wife yelling at me a little later, he said, "Ron, I hate it when people piss on my boots and tell me it's raining." That's what government has done for a long time in too many cases.
Yeah.
We've got to be honest. So when you hear on TV that we have a balanced budget, $419 billion in debt, they talk about the interest going to service that. They talk about the shell games, or they go down to Frank Fat's down the street from the Capitol and celebrate. That's nothing to celebrate, $419 billion in debt on the backs of 38 million Californians. That's a travesty. And it goes back to being honest. Who I am, what I do, my roots have all influenced who I am. I've been in the trenches. Let me tell you about one of the most recent successes I had. James talked about moving the ball down the field. In my little community, I farm in Gridley. Building a house on our farm was next to impossible because of the environmental regulations, being in a floodplain, and what you'd have to do to design it to comply with all those rules and regulations. My wife and I live in Chico. It's a great town for the most part. Drive to my farm, see what goes on down there. I pay property taxes there. My farm equipment, I can't vote there because my address is in Chico. But yet I'm taxed there. That's taxation without representation in my book. Last year, the school wanted to pass a new school bond. They currently rent a gym from the fairgrounds, which is across the street from the high school, at about $80,000 a year. They decided that wasn't good enough. They wanted to build a new gym with a $10 billion bond. The interest on that bond was over $250,000 a year, let alone the construction, the maintenance, the operations, the engineering. And that goes back to the kind of common sense that is lacking. But we had all these consultants and the school board and everybody all in favor of this. And the superintendent told me, oh, our students will rise to the occasion if we spend all this money on another gym that I can't even vote for, but am required to pay taxes on if it passes. So we mounted some opposition to that and told voters in our district the truth. We have a great gym now. It supports the fair, which is a little county fair in Gridley. We're paying a pretty good rate to rent that, but just the interest would be $250,000 right out of our community, gone to bondholders someplace else, right out of our schools. So we made people aware of those issues. They can play basketball just fine on the one they had. Of all the school bonds on the ballot last year, and there was 100 and something of them, that received the least amount of support because we told the truth. And we weren't afraid to speak the truth. I think that's what has to happen. We have to start being honest. And you get guys that want to build careers in Sacramento or use these positions as stepping stones, don't have a solid foundation, don't have some roots that dig deep into that soil where they came from. That's what you get, is some of that other BS that my grandfather talked about. And if that ever happens to me or even gets close, haul my ass back down to my farm in a pickup and put me in a tractor, because I don't want to see that happen. My wife has told my friends not to let that happen. Be able to have a beer at the back of the tailgate and let's get our issues solved. Let's figure it out. Let's do it like we've done for generations. And that's the way it ought to be in Sacramento. I don't care whether you have a D or an R behind your name. Let's be honest with one another. So thank you very much.
Sorry. Terry, let me start with the state of Jefferson part of it.
I've never seen you in a tie before, and I've seen you on
I reverted or something.
It kind of threw me a little bit. I've never seen you in one.
You know, four times in the past, states have divided into two. And never has there been two states or two parts of state combining into one like the state of Jefferson. However, if you read the Constitution, it specifically addresses that. And so it's certainly possible.
We're not doing it. It's got nothing to do with our issue. So my only concern was that you were addressing an issue that you didn't know anything about. It has nothing to do with Oregon. Nothing. Zero.
All right.
Nothing's totally different.
All right. So, but the point here is that when they draw the maps of the state of Jefferson, it always includes, what, 13 counties?
A map, yeah, 16. So
All right. Well,
thinking about
if you read the newspapers, they always like to put up a map, and it's based on
you believe the newspaper.
it's based on the state of Jefferson in 1940 or 41, I guess it was, when there almost was a state of Jefferson, and World War II came along, and the state of Jefferson went by the wayside. But all right, so. That is
Talk later, and I'll fill you in.
okay. So we'll get to that. Talking about the debt for a minute, and splitting California, and I again say we split it three ways. What about the debt? This is a California debt. The debt has to be then. If we split the state into three states, that debt has to be divided up among.
That's divided up amongst population.
Well, yes, no, yes and no, yes and no. If the debt, let's say a bond measure was passed and it was strictly for something in Los Angeles, that debt should go to the southern part of the state. If it was a bond that was strictly for Northern California, it should stay with Northern California. The cost of doing the bullet train, because it doesn't get into Northern California, shouldn't be included in the Northern California portion. And then there's statewide debt that you just got to apportion, and you're right, you probably have to do that by population. All right. Now the other question, away from the state of Jefferson for a minute. How do we gain your trust? Well, I think they touched on it, but there's sort of a starting point. And the starting point is you actually have to listen to people. You actually have to sit down and listen to what people are concerned about, and not just people that supported you, let's say in your campaign where you win, but you're representing everybody in that district, and you as a representative, you should be required, and I guarantee I will do this, I will sit down with anybody who wants to talk about their issue and listen to them. I may disagree with you when we're done, but I will know what your point is and maybe do some further research on it if that's required. That's the starting point. That's how you start to gain trust as a representative.
Jim, Ryan, James, thank you so much for coming. And all three of you have gained my respect. I wouldn't say a harmful word against any of the three of you. I want to make sure, Jim, that you understand this is kind of an assumption among everybody that Tea Party is all Republican, but it really isn't. And really, if you wanted to, maybe we're all stronger conservative, more to that side, but there is Democrats and independents and libertarians and Republicans And I just wanted to make sure, clarify that we really are quite the conglomerate. And somehow we're getting along and can, you know. Okay, this may sound a little like a loaded question. I assure you it is not, because, and I'm going to ask you about, I heard Ryan say stepping stone 2 times tonight. And that is what I'm interested in, stepping stone. And I in my mind, that it doesn't mean that's an awful thing, you know, that you're just using this, because we really do need some good representation at the top, and it takes a while to get good representation up there. And considering that all 3 of you guys, we really do get to vote for you, and Southern Cal isn't putting you in. I mean, you are going to be our you know, you represent us truly. So my question, kind of twofold thing, stepping stone here, gentlemen, and then end goal. You know, I mean, really, your life. You know, I'm sorry to be so, you know, far out there, but a stepping stone. And where do you see yourself going? And I'd like to hear from all 3 of you, please.
Well, as a starting point, I'm 63 years old. You know, probably not using this as a stepping stone to some other position in the future. But you're absolutely right. There's a learning curve, and you can't expect to really get things done right off the bat until you figure out how they do get done. But having said that, I'm 63 years old, and I wouldn't use this as a stepping stone to some other position in the state of California, the U.S. government. If we get the state of Jefferson created, I would be tempted to go for some state position in the state of Jefferson. I really would.
Thank you for the question. I'm not using it as a stepping stone. I want to go down there and do good work for the residents of this state that put me there. I think you mentioned it's not Southern California or LA or San Francisco or even Sacramento folks that are putting us in office. There's voters here. There's about 500,000 people in an assembly district. That's men, women, and children. Our job is to represent all of them to the best of our abilities. And going back to being honest, forthright, that's what I want to do. Not use it as a stepping stone. Stay true to my roots, who I am, what I value, and move this state forward with the causes that we believe in. So thank you.
Well, let me share something with you. When I was a young boy, I saw my grandfather ran for county supervisor, and that had a really big impact on me. It was really instilled in me that we have an obligation to work for our communities, that the good things in community don't just come by happenstance, they come by people standing up for what's right and doing that. So I was very much inspired by that. And I prayed when I was a young boy. I prayed and asked the Lord to give me a gift of leadership and wisdom, just as he gave Solomon the gift of wisdom. And I still pray that to this day, you know, because I believe that I've been blessed with the gift of leadership, and I want to use it as much as I can, you know. And I've used it at Sutter County, and I think I've done a good job for the citizens there. But I've also seen that there's this huge need now at the state level, and that we now more than ever we need bold and effective leadership. That just like, you know, Terry was saying, you know, it's not enough to just say how bad things are, okay? And they are bad. I mean, we all know that, but we could talk about that for days. You have to go down there and do something, and I believe I have those skills to do that. I'm going to use that, not as a stepping stone to anything. This is the problem. It's here in this state, and we need legislators that will work to get things done and move the ball down the court, and I intend to do that. And I can tell you that I will use that, and I will pray every day for wisdom and for favor and for things that will help us change this state and get it back to the Golden State again. So that's my intent.
Recently, our governor gave a nice chunk of money to be allocated for the education, the college education of non-U.S. citizens. How do each of you feel about that?
Can you just repeat the question one more time? I'm sorry, I didn't.
Governor Brown allocated a chunk of money to pay for the college education of non-U.S. citizens. How do each of you feel about that?
Totally 100% opposed. You know, I mean, we need to be focused on our citizens and the people who are paying taxes here in this state and this country, and that's what the education should be for.
That's right. Those of you in the room that might not be familiar with that, I think it's the $5 billion that Janet Napolitano and Governor Brown said would go to help educating illegal immigrants. And virtually the same month, University of California, hospitals like at Davis and so forth, shut off access to people with health care plans to go to those hospitals. Many of the health care plans that they once accepted, they don't, or they no longer will under Obamacare. And I think that's a travesty, and our priorities are wrong. You've got to get back to the basics, common sense. So I'm against that. You pay the bill. Let's not forget that. It's not Governor Brown's money or Janet Napolitano's money. It's our money, our hard-earned money. We can't forget that.
Well, I have a little different perspective on this, because we're not, actually the way the question was formed, it made it sound like we're just giving money to people from out of the country or who just in general are illegal. No, the money's going to people that their parents brought them into the state of California. True, it was illegal, but these kids didn't have any choice when they came into California. They've been living here all their lives. They will continue to live here all their lives, and there is no reason why we shouldn't allow them to be educated. Have you gone into a medical office or a hospital recently and listened to the accents of the people working in there? Our schools aren't producing professionals in the healthcare field sufficiently, and we have to import our professionals. The point of all this, well, we wouldn't have enough if we didn't import them. Well, I know we need to increase. We need to be educating those people, but we're not, and so we're forced to do it. And see, that's the I think the fallacy in the argument. You assume that something is being taken away to make these students educated. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. Okay.
One thing I would like to say with no disrespect whatsoever, I went to Vietnam and I fought for this country, and now at 63 years old I got to learn a second language. That is not.
All right. Well, the thing about it is we have an 11 million person problem in the United States. Well, I would have to disagree with you, and I believe that these children that came into our country, even though they were illegal, they weren't the ones making that decision. And we have a responsibility to them as well, and we do not need to penalize them.
They can work and go to school like all the rest of them.
And that's exactly what they're doing.
No, no. My granddaughter, her grant she got was canceled. She had to quit college, but the illegals are going to get to go? No.
I've heard this over and over again, and the argument is that somehow these illegal children get some advantage over the legal children in the state of California, and I can just tell you that's not true.
Go down to San Jacinto and watch the kids walk over and get on the bus and go to school and get free lunch and get free breakfast and get their free education and get back to the border every day. And don't tell me it doesn't happen. I have watched.
Well, I can tell you this. I've probably appeared in front of Tea Party groups 20, 30 times. Terry, how many times have I been in Reading? I don't know. But there's a kind of a pattern and this is the pattern that I'm seeing right as we speak now, that we talk about various things and people are kind of with me and they understand what I'm talking about. They may not disagree, but eventually the immigration question is coming. And let's face it, I hear you, but I disagree with you, and I'm telling you the way I see it.
If the laws had been enforced like they should have been, and there's a lot of your party that's working against this would never even be an issue.
Well,
You guys, let's agree to disagree on this one and move on to the next question, please. Go ahead.
Okay, California has a constitution. Originally, it was set up so it had to be changed by no change took place unless it was a vote of the people. However, after a couple of years, the people voted to let the politicians in Sacramento alter the Constitution. Since then, it has been totally slaughtered. It may as well not be a Constitution unless some politician wants to make a point. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I agree with you. The California Constitution is a convoluted mess, is what it is. You know, there's a lot of good things in there. You know, like Proposition 13 and protections for taxpayers. But it has become a very, like I said, our own Constitution is very short, concise. U.S. Constitution, and it has the principles in there. California's has been, amended so many times. I do believe that they still have to go to the people if they pass a constitutional amendment in the legislature. It still has to be voted on. But yeah, I mean, one thing that I've talked about and I think might be something that should be considered is having a constitutional convention. We had one back in the late 1800s, and we reformed the California Constitution. And I think now we're so, there's times when you look at how far we've come, how many laws have been passed, regulation after regulation. It's just piled on and on. It's almost like, hey, should we do a do-over and start over and get back just to the basic principles of what government should do and nothing more? And I think maybe the answer to that is maybe doing a constitutional convention where we do just that. We come together as a people and form a basic constitutional document, limited form of government that emphasizes freedom and liberty and individual choice rather than what we have right now.
I agree. It is a mess. There are some interesting things in there like Prop 13, but it'd be interesting to know if we had a constitutional convention, just what would come out of there. Would we get those freedoms and liberty that we all hold so dear? Because look at the mess that's there now. So if we ask them to start over and draft the new rules of the game, if you will, that could be interesting to see what comes out of there. So I agree it's a mess. That's why we have to get out, tell the truth, tell our message, and not be afraid to stand up for what's right. That's the way our country was founded. I think we can get it back on track if we work at it. So it's going to take all of us to make it work, though.
And I too agree. The California Constitution is a mess. It's been amended over 100 times. Quite a contrast to the U.S. Constitution. And I actually like the idea of a constitutional convention again, and going back to the state of Jefferson for a minute. If we did separate the states, there would have to be a constitutional convention for each of the new states. And I believe that our Constitution is in such a mess. A Constitution should be like the U.S. Constitution, where it gives general principles, but it doesn't get down to the specifics. The fallacy of the California Constitution is it tried to fine-tune every little thing, and that's why you have to amend it over 100 times. But anyway, I support a constitutional convention.
Patsy, go ahead.
I don't know that I actually really have a question here, other than I appreciate all of you coming and talking to us tonight and getting to know you and I respect your leadership in Berkeley. What a place to develop the young Republicans. So anyway, but I do have a comment for Mr. Reed. It's on the education, and I'm going to brag as a mom. you're not going to ever make any headway with your attitude with this group, especially with me, about the education. And I'll tell you why. Our daughter is a wonderful example of what can be done. She became a firefighter at 18 years old, seasonally, to put herself through school. And she had an 18-year career with the California Division of Forestry. And then she fell in love at 38 years old and got married and had a baby. And she went back to school and got her master's degree. And she started teaching fire science in Southern California at a college in Southern California. She had a second baby, and 3 years ago, her husband came home at Christmas time and said he wanted a divorce for Christmas. So here she is with 2 little children and working part-time. And she had just started her doctorate degree. Now here comes the bragging part. A year ago she completed her doctorate, and this last summer she was hired as a dean of technology at a college in the Bay Area. So she said, Mom, she said, the best thing that you and Dad ever did for us is you gave us a good work ethic. Now you're not going to make any headway with this group because we've all raised our children the same way. And our children were raised to work for what they got, and these young men have shown that they have done that also. So my hats are off to the younger ones. And by the way, there's worse ages than 63.
No, first of all, that's a great story, and I just want to tell my own. So about 20 years ago, my wife was an attorney also, and we moved up to this little town in Shasta County called Fall River Mills. And we opened our own little office there, and about the first phone call we got when we opened our office was from the high school. And they said, we have a girl who's a junior at our high school that needs to be emancipated. She doesn't have any money to do it. Would you be willing to help her out? And we said, sure. And we had her come in and talk with us, and it turned out she didn't need to be emancipated. She didn't need legal help. She was living with her father and stepmother and 3 little brothers in a one-bedroom house, and had no place to sleep. In fact, was sleeping in an old junky car that was parked in front. And if you know Fall River Mills, it gets cold in the winter. And so rather than give her some legal aid, we asked her to move in with us, and she did. And none of her family had ever gotten through high school before, ever graduated from high school. When she was living with us, she graduated from high school. She went into a junior college with a program that automatically admitted her to UC Davis. If she only did the various things that were absolutely required, which she did, she was admitted to UC Davis, then went on and got a teacher's credential, and she's now a school teacher.
You know, we got to get back that work can be rewarded. I heard a statistic the other day that 34% of our high school kids don't want to have a job. Yeah. That's a little scary to me. It's a little scary. I was raised on a farm. Before you went to school, you got up, did your chores, including taking the trash out and doing all the things around the house. Then you went to feed the animals. You had to make sure you were ready to get to go to school. That's how I was raised from a very early age by 2 parents and grandparents that made sure we had the right upbringing so that we could have our feet planted firmly on the ground. Work hard, get up, fix fence, and sometimes you didn't get to do the things in town like the rest of the kids got to do. You had to stay and bust your rear end to make things happen on the farm, especially if times were a little tough. And you got to learn to save in the good times so they can get you through the bad times. And it's very rewarding and enriching personally to see the fruits of our labor when we plant a crop in the spring or raise that livestock and pull a calf, baby it, doctor it, the crop, the cattle, whatever it is, get to harvest it. That work ethic is instilled at a very early age, kids that have that experience. So whatever it be, whether it be in business, selling insurance, or on a farm, we can't lose sight of the value of hard work, determination, dedication. We can't have government take away those opportunities for it to be rewarded. Thank you.
You know, I think there's a couple of problems with higher education in California. One is, you know, Jim, what did you say it was when you went to Berkeley?
It was $125 a quarter.
$125 a quarter. Now we're talking about $30,000 a year to go to some of these UC University of California. What's the difference really? What's the difference between then and now? Well, I'll tell you one very big difference is when I went to Cal, they had the vice chancellor for diversity services in the Middle East, assistant to the president. They've got all kinds of bureaucracy at all these universities that has nothing to do with teaching students and with giving them the basic knowledge and education that they need to become productive citizens, and everything to do with just continuing this higher education bureaucracy. I think that's one of the reasons why higher education has gotten so expensive that it does put it out of reach for many people. And we need to talk about how can we educate people and make education really more affordable. And I think one of the ways you do that is by cutting through a lot of the bureaucracy that we see in higher education right now. Another is really opening up the ability to do online courses and things like that. Assemblyman Logue had a great bill this year that I think he's still trying to move through the legislature, which would allow kids to start in science, technology, and math in high school and start that education, get it online, and it would be basically half the cost of a CSU education. I think it was $10,000 education, which right now is cheap. So things like that, trying to make it more affordable, more in reach for kids, and do more with less. We have to do that. I think the other part is that, and you're seeing it, you talk to employers throughout this state, and they will tell you, hey, I've college grads, great. They don't know how to do anything. I'm getting these college grads, they don't know how to do the jobs that I need them to do. That's a huge problem. Why aren't we ensuring that our kids are getting an education that will show them how to actually do something that is needed in society right now? Head knowledge is great, and learning and those things, but I guess a Renaissance education is great. But if you can't actually do something that's going to be productive to our society, that's a problem. So our education really needs to be reformed to really focus on that, teaching our kids so that they will be able to do the jobs of today and tomorrow, getting ready for what the economy is going to look like in the future so that those kids will be prepared. That's what we need to do in the higher education. And, maybe just to end here is, let's not bash on Jim too much here tonight. Look, he sounds like he's a solid member, supporter of the Second Amendment, which I very much appreciate. And he sounds like he's got some fiscal sense, that he wants to, try and get things in line. And let me tell you what, Jim, the Republican Party would love to have you over. The water is fine, I think you could be just like Ronald Reagan and say, hey, look, the Democratic Party left me, because it certainly has. Just so you know, it doesn't represent those values that, maybe it used to. So anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you guys tonight and to have this real frank discussion amongst all the candidates.
I think we can just about say that about the Republican Party, too. I'm going to ask a question, and Kate's going to wrap it up, but I want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you guys for coming. And remember that we need help with tables and chairs, please. But my question would be, James and Ryan, you guys are supporting the Sites Reservoir. I want to know, what about the ranchers that are going to lose their land? Because I know two of them, and they are not happy. One's a Republican, one's a Democrat, and it doesn't matter. But they're not happy. What about them?
And look, that's always a tough thing when you have public projects, right? When we do highways, and everybody, look, we need to be spending a lot more money on our highways than we need to do on a bullet train to nowhere, right? On roads that people actually use, But anytime you do these public projects, there is the need to actually have to take private property. Now, the Constitution allows for that. If it's for a public purpose and people are paid fair compensation for the land, right? And so that's always what needs to be the focus when you do this. You need to ensure that, okay, is this for a public purpose? Well, I would argue that, water storage in this state, we absolutely need that, right? We have a big water problem in the state. So I think that's there. But then the question is, hey, let's ensure that if that goes forward, that people are paid the fair market value for their property. And so, you definitely need to be very careful because obviously this is private property. Just like I said, anytime that should be the foremost thing respected. But I think in this case, sites is important not only to our protecting our water rights in the North State, but for ensuring that we have viable water supply in California. And so I think we need to move forward with that.
Good question, Patty. I've had a chance to talk with some of the landowners under the footprint of the current proposal for Sites Reservoir as well. And just out there today, as a matter of fact, another landowner's name was mentioned. And I won't reveal her name, but in the conversation with these folks, they said that she is aware that her children's future is at stake. If there's no water in this state, whether they want to be farmers or doctors, whatever it is, especially here in the North State, that if we don't do something to generate new water and stop Southern California from trying to take more of our water down there, her children's future will be jeopardized. I thought that was a very interesting point. And I look at this issue from the prism of knowing folks who lost their farms and ranches underneath the footprint of the current Oroville Dam. A woman that my parents know very well named Gail, her family lost their farm underneath the current Oroville Dam. She's the same way. She understands that her son is home today farming on their farmstead because of the opportunities that that dam provides, whether it be the power, the water, and they go and recreate on that lake. And it's interesting to be out there with her when she talks about the way it used to be back in the 50s and 60s where she grew up. So I think people out there understand the issue that's at stake from a much broader perspective. That being said, I know they're planning a landowners meeting coming up in mid-December. I'd encourage her to contact the Joint Powers Authority. There's a website set up for that. They can call any one of the county offices of Glenn or Colusa or RD 108, Glenn-Colusa Irrigation Districts, et cetera, to find out more information on that. But I want to talk just briefly on eminent domain. I think that's probably been abused in this country and in this state more times than not, and we need to respect private property rights for sure. But like I said, then again, it's important to come together too and be aware that our future is at stake. So water is a large part of that.
Well, and everybody involved needs to stop and ask themselves, what if it was my ranch?
That's right. But it goes back to communication. It goes back to reaching out and talking to the people. And it's not just under the footprint of the lake, because we're also talking about building a pipeline to the Sacramento River, which would affect, I think the number was about 70 different parcels along that trail. So there are some issues there. But a lot of those families understand that for there to be a future for their family, there has to be some of these things done in this state too. And I respect that. So thank you. Good question.
Hey. Or Jim?
No, I'm fine.
I want to thank you, of course, for the three of you gentlemen coming. I think you were all wonderful. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of Jim for sitting there and being as strong as he was. I was a Democrat. The Democrat Party left me. I became a Republican. Now the Republican Party has pretty much left me. I'm a constitutional conservative, and I don't know where I am. But I want to ask you, gentlemen, do any of you have a Constitution in your pockets? Shame on you. You do?
I said I don't, but I have things that remind me what's important.
Shame on you. You should always have this with you, no matter where you go. That's from our two parties. My question. There is someone that a lot of us watch because he gives us a lot of great information. And one of the questions he asks anyone who, one of the questions he asks of anyone who's running for office, he asks this question and he says, how is your soul? And my question to you, each one of you, is how is your soul?
You know, I just met him tonight for the first time. Oh, there he is in the back of the room. Terry, you, over there in the corner. You said something that made my day. You mentioned that my eyes kind of lit up when my wife walked in the room. Well, that is the fabric of my soul. Family, honesty, truthful values, hard work. And I think that my partner, and this maybe could be said of any of us in the room, is a reflection of that. But that is who I am. That comment made my day. And so I want to thank you for that. And she is the love of my life. And if there's a reflection of me, I want it to be all the good things in her too. Yeah. No doubt about that. But that's my soul, family. That's what it's really about. And we are members of some organizations in agriculture, and we like to say that 4 things really matter. And you can prioritize these, may be different depending on the time of day, but faith, family, farming, and fun. And those are all things that are a part of my soul. But like I said, family and my wife in particular are important. So I'm glad you noticed that. It's who I am. So that's a reflection of me. So thank you. And that's my soul.
What a great question, because I think that's anytime that you step out on something, especially something like this, you definitely have to do that soul searching. And it's something that, me and my wife did, when we were thinking about running for this office, and we do this when we make major decisions, is we get together and we pray about it, and we talk it through. And then we made that decision, and that was something that I really wanted to look at, and I wanted to make sure that, I was being led with the right motivation, the right directions. And so I know that because that was something that was confirmed in prayer with my wife. So my soul is well, but I ask that you continue to pray for our family. Anytime you run in a campaign, it's a lot of work. It's time away from your family, and I think you probably see that with your own. When you're working in a job, and when you see your own elected officials traveling around this very large district, service means that sometimes you're going to be taken away from your family, and that's a tough thing. It's hard to do. So I'd ask that you continue to keep me in your thoughts and prayers as we move forward in this campaign. Thank you.
Well, I seem to be the only one with my wife not here. And I have been married for 38 years. And we have a really special relationship. But, unlike my 2 friends here to my right, this is my 3rd campaign, having gone through 2 congressional races, putting my wife through 2 congressional races, and now a 3rd one. When I told her, I think I'm running for the Assembly in the 3rd District, she said, "Oh, not again." But, she is a great supporter of mine. Everybody who makes a contribution to the campaign gets a handwritten note from my wife. And I know people who made small contributions, and they loved that thank you letter so much that they couldn't wait to be at an event where my wife was going to be there so they could talk with her. And I have 2 children. They're both adults. One's an attorney, one's a middle management. But I went through so many swimming meets and football games and all that baseball games. Now that I'm campaigning for public office, I tell them, now it's payback time. When I walk door to door, you're with me, right? And they say, yes. So family is very important to me. Both in the congressional race and now in this assembly race, I have specific ideas that I think I can help the country, the state, and the people of the district. I promise that I will work hard to accomplish those things. Thank you.